Azur Lane is a revolutionary gacha game. While it may not seem like it, but this simple bullet hell style shooter with extremely simple visuals may deceive you. Gacha games aren't exactly known for their riveting gameplay, and a case like this is no exception. I mean, what's so engaging with a bunch of chibi characters on a flat 2D background as they shoot at enemies on the other side of the screen? Well, 9 years later, the game still remains as one that's relevant in today's gacha market. So how does Azur Lane do it? What's the secret to their longevity? Well, the answer is more complex than you think, but we'll get to it eventually. My name is Psyche, and I went back in time to explore one of the relics in gacha gaming. Azur Lane has been around for a while, so it must have done something right. But what is it specifically? Well, playing Azur Lane comes with all of its charms, as well as all of the jank and minute frustrations you'll experience with an older era gacha. So does Azur Lane still hold up to today's standards? Let's find out. Before I continue, I'd like to give a brief shout out to this video sponsor, EnjoyGM. EnjoyGM is a recharge/top-up site for your favorite mobile games, including some of the biggest gacha games out there, such as Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, and Wuthering Waves. There are packs available for players of varying spending amounts, including ones to guarantee a character of your choice. The prices are around 30% cheaper compared to official sources, and at times certain special discounts will be given out to increase the value even more. There is a safety guarantee should any step of the top-up process go wrong, and with some of the most popular gacha titles, you don't actually have to input your account information like your email and password. Just your user ID and the server you play on are enough, and the product will appear in-game almost immediately. EnjoyGM offers up to 35% off select packs with 24/7 support and global payment options. Use my link in the description or pinned comment to get an extra discount when you top up. Once again, thank you to EnjoyGM for sponsoring the review, and let's return to Azur Lane. I debated whether or not I even wanted to make a long-form review video on the game. Considering that I played it for almost 2 months, I knew that making informed opinions on the game in such a short time frame is pretty difficult. I tend to have a 1-month play period to get accustomed to the game and start making the review, except given that Azur Lane launched in the older era of gacha games, it's had years of power and feature creep. Odd mechanics that are not commonly seen in gacha games, or harder to understand, and slower progression that makes unlocking most of the features unrealistic in such a short time frame. We will see a lot of this later. Azur Lane is developed by Yongshi and Manju Games, published by Yostar. It was originally released in 2017, back when gacha games were still at its infancy stage. Unlike the first Girls Frontline, despite having similar mechanics, this one seemed to have fared way better. So good that they're even making an open-world gacha game. That's how you know if the company is successful. It still maintains its steady player base to this day. However, I'm willing to bet that the majority of the time you hear about this game isn't actually related to the gameplay. Just like other older era gachas I've covered so far, some of its systems and mechanics might seem a little weird. Opening up the game for the first time, I was prompted by a data download of 24 gigabytes. I gotta ask, what the hell is taking up that much space for a game that's literally just chibi 2D avatars moving across the screen? Guess we'll find out in due time. Now, trying to get into a game like this in 2026 is gonna pose a unique challenge. Azur Lane is considered a relic of the last generation, meaning that knowledge of a lot of mechanics commonly seen in today's games is a hit or miss whether they apply here, so I was going to have to start over to get used to its system. Luckily, I played a decent bit of older gacha games, so I felt like I was able to get somewhat of a head start. However, even considering that, the game is showing its age, and as someone that has no background knowledge of the game, I have to know which ships are good among the hundreds that are out in the game at this point, and if any guides or tier lists I consult are even updated to 2026 standards. Azur Lane was made during a time when the gacha space was still relatively underground, so the scope of the game wasn't even intended to be at the level of where it is today. It was simply designed as a casual experience collecting ship girls and oogling at the live 2D skins. The story of Azur Lane is... well, I wasn't really able to get into it, as the story wasn't something these games focused a lot on back then. So the early portions were more of a way to introduce you to the game world. In Azur Lane, you play as the commander of a fleet of ship girls. Yes, the characters you can collect are personified versions of various battleships that once existed in history. Some of them are purely fictional, but you gotta find some way to add new entries to the roster somehow. What a creative way to morph inanimate things into anime waifus. I wonder what people will come up with next. Maybe morph guns and weapons? Nah, that'd be ridiculous. When I got to the main menu for the first time, there was a phone messaging system where I saw DMs and group chats with all the ships, and I was immediately confused. So does the captain just magically know everyone while I'm here left in the dark? I actually saw minimal story segments for the first 4 or so chapters in the campaign, and the story I did see were events where the ship girls interact with each other in lighthearted ways. So I'm going to assume that it's one of those games where the story isn't the selling point. Speaking of which, the premise of the game is remarkably similar to a browser-based game that already existed ever since the early 2010s, Kantai Collection, or Kankule for short. It's arguable if it's even considered as a gacha game, and the scene for it outside of Japan is basically non-existent. This is one of many cases that Japan wanted to keep the properties domestically, since you can't play Kankule outside the country, so you just have to be a hardcore weeb to know it even exists. Azur Lane basically said, "Alright, we'll do it ourselves," and published their own spin on it. Despite this, it looks like the game is still a hit in Japan as well. I should also mention that the current version of Azur Lane has taken a detour from its original vision. If you take a look at the ship girls that were there at launch, a lot of them are designed around the actual battleships they were modeled from, where they will either resemble them in some way with their appearance or personality. These days, that's more or less a bygone era, as the game has clearly found its audience, and the fan service elements have taken center stage. Let's just say you're definitely not playing Azur Lane for the historical accuracy. Trying to play Azur Lane for the gameplay is a strange process, since if you look at their Twitter, let's just say that the gameplay is clearly not the priority when they're marketing it. Learning the game in today's age can be pretty tricky, but I have played Fate Grand Order and Girls Frontline for a decent amount of time, and I can see some resemblance of what they're doing. I knew that going into this was going to require some sort of guide, since it's very likely there's some systems that's been updated over the years that's important that the game won't tell you. Generally, older gacha games have gone through many cycles of updates, to the point that a game might be a stark contrast to what it was when it first came out. And along the way, there's going to be some vitally important systems the game will not make clear to you. Anyways, here's the brief for the general gameplay from what I can find. You'll assemble a fleet of 6 ship girls, 3 spots in the vanguard, 3 spots in rear guard, or just called the main fleet. The one in the middle of the rear guard has a gold highlight, which is your flagship. If the unit in this slot dies, then you lose the fleet. Doesn't matter if all of your vanguard goes down. You'll just be a sitting duck, but you don't lose right away. On the other hand, it doesn't matter if everyone else is alive. If your flagship sinks, you just lose. You are allowed to choose who to place in that important slot, and some ships even gain a bonus for being placed here. Anyways, in the stage, you will enter a 2D map consisting of grids, and there are enemy ships that you can battle. Your job is to sink the enemy flagship, except it doesn't appear on the map right away, and the tile they occupy can only be revealed when you defeat enough enemies. There are also random events that can happen when you step onto a tile, like an airstrike that just damages everyone, or an ambush where you have a chance to evade to continue without a fight. This mechanic is determined by its own airspace control stat, so you won't get ambushed if it's high enough. Each fleet has a munition count of 5, and engaging in a fight will decrease by 1. There are sometimes ways to replenish it well in the map, but even if it reaches 0, you can still do fights, just like your damage will be weaker. I didn't know about this, and the game doesn't seem to tell you either. When you engage in combat, you will control your vanguard ships while your rear guard supports you from the back. Your vanguard doesn't necessarily have to be the heavy-hitting portion of the team, since your rear guard has multiple ways to unleash powerful skills, but the units up front just need to be tanky and survive, either by having high HP or high evasion. You can tell that the gameplay is reminiscent of bullet hell, where you're supposed to evade the projectiles. When there's projectiles flying at you like this, it's kind of a hard ask to expect a player to masterfully weave through everything. Plus, controlling 3 ships at once makes your hitbox troublesome to manage. There are certain stages where you're required to survive or beat it with special conditions, and if you know what you're doing, you can potentially beat it before the game's recommended power level. I found that torpedoes do the most damage to you, so at the very least, if you're not way above the level requirements, just try to dodge those only. During combat, you can order airstrikes and missiles from your rear guard, as well as firing torpedoes from your vanguard. All these skills take time to refill, with a limit on how often you can use it. When your ship's health gets lowered, their chibi avatars will start smoking and bursting into flames to mimic the integrity of the hull breaking or something. Look, I'm not too sure how the anatomy of these ship girls work, and it's clear you're not supposed to question it. So let's just all forget about this and enjoy some waifu PNGs. If one of your fleets go down, it's not a failure until all of your fleets are down. if the level permits having multiple fleets entering the stage, then you still have a chance to defeat the final enemy flagship. This is the core gameplay, but as soon as I started going into the wiki page to check the more intricate mechanics, I knew it was gonna be one of those games where if you want to get into it, you're gonna have to learn it yourself. A number of older gacha games like FGO do have some deep mechanics. It's just that the game doesn't make an attempt to tell you what they are and how impactful knowing these mechanics will be. For example, I was confused about this gauge that sometimes appears on the right side of some of my rearguard ships. After failing to learn about it in-game, I found out that it's a detection meter, that when the threshold is passed, that ship will be targeted by enemies. But only some ship types in the game have this mechanic, aside from some edge cases. This meter can be affected by a multitude of factors shown here. Each level also has an airspace control value. It's basically a stat check to see how you measure up to the level requirements, but not having enough doesn't instantly ruin you, it just lowers your combat effectiveness a bit. There's also a wide degree of ship types in the game, like destroyers, carriers, and submarines. Here's the full list of ship types, and only certain ships can fit into the vanguard or rearguard. Specifically, carrier types will take up the bulk of the rearguard units, since the idea is that they're supposed to resemble those ships that either fire long-range artillery or send out fighter jets. Some missions will allow you to deploy a submarine fleet, where they will mark a number of tiles that they are within range, and if you start a battle well within one of those tiles, then the subs will also aid you. There's 3 star ratings for each stage. Upon just beating it, defeating a certain number of escort fleets, or defeating all the enemy fleets in one instance of the battle. Each ship also has their own morale points, where continuously battling will lower it. If you try to keep doing battles when a unit's morale is at 0, you can still continue, just that their affinity level will actually go down. Aside from some non-farming modes, there's also some side activities you can do. One of them is an island planner. I knew for sure that this was added sometime post-launch, since the style it goes for is almost unrecognizable from the base game. Anyways, I didn't get too deep into this, but you're basically managing the finances and properties on this island. There's also the classic dorm mode, and this explains the 24 gigabytes of storage this game takes up. This mode actually requires you to be at player level 80, which I wasn't even able to reach until way beyond a month into the game, so they're really making you work towards this. You think that they make this as accessible as possible, since I'm sure it would lure a lot of new players into it, but I guess not. Anyways, you'll notice that the game suddenly becomes 3D, and you can visit the dorms of different ship girls, making you feel that you're playing a different game altogether. You can interact, play mini-games, and change the scenery. Again, I wasn't able to get too deep into this, but there's also a furniture and affection system here too. Now, I'm fairly certain that around a month's time isn't enough to fully explore every corner of the gameplay. As you know, everyone plays Azur Lane for something else. So the progression model of the game would be where I say Azur Lane both excels and falls short on, depending on how you approach it and what kind of a player you are. I'll start with the progression types probably everyone will know. Your units will have their max level cap determined by their star tier. While XP books do exist in the game, it's actually inefficient to just use them on everyone. See, this game has the older traditional model of progression where you're supposed to just run the ships you want to level into a battle, and gain XP naturally that way. You'll have to spend the oil currency to sortie into stages, so if you think you can just spend 2 minutes a day to sweep some stages and be done, you will be disappointed. The later stages have an oil cap so that you can be more efficient when farming. I'm not sure what's the reasoning behind this, but it is very valuable to access these stages to save oil. You will have to grind to level up your ships, and certain stages have drops that are extremely useful for progression that letting the game autoplay for 1 to 2 hours a day is not unusual, especially as a new player. You often hit the cap for your oil reserve quite often, so you just have to play the game to spend it. Luckily, there is a comprehensive list of auto farming features that you can enable when you're just farming, so you can just put it on your phone or second monitor while you do other things. You're allowed to double up rewards using this token, but you're not allowed to just sweep any stage and call it a day. I believe the absolute max level cap for ships is 125, but leveling past 100 will require a special currency. Upon reaching certain thresholds, the next star tier becomes available, in which you can feed them either a duplicate of the same ship or these bullens to substitute one. Now, increasing the star tier is a massive power boost to the ship, and it's something that you'll want to max out if you want to use a ship at harder stages. Not only does each start raise the stats significantly, they also give new skills or boosts them to a considerable degree. You can also feed fodder ships to enhance their stats, so this game is one where if you accidentally fed a high rarity or high level ship, then you can permanently lose them. Luckily, the game puts in quite a number of safeguards in place to save you from your stupidity. You can also equip 5 slots of gear to each ship, and this determines what kind of weapons they will be using while in combat. The gear rarity can range quite a bit, while the early game gear usually drops from just playing or these boxes that give random gear. However, later into the game, you have to craft the higher grade ones. You can level the gear with this special booklet currency, but not all gear can be equipped by all ship types. In addition, there is an augment slot that allows for yet another piece of gear. Some units in the game have their own special augment that modifies their kit in some way. In order to get this unique augment, you have to first get this meteor chunk thing, then enough XP to craft it, and of course, gold. I was only able to craft 1 or 2 unique augments during the time I played, and that's due to the currency you need for it being extremely rare for some reason. And the gold required is like over 20k, which is not a small amount by any means for a beginner. Assuming there's no ongoing events giving you a freebie, I estimate that it's gonna take you like 3 weeks to get 1 unique augment gear, assuming you're not a late game player. Alternatively, when going into the gear menu to craft stuff, there's no filter or search function to craft the augment for a specific ship, so you just have to know what it looks like or search it up. If you want to craft other high-end gear, then you'll have to gather the parts from a mode called Operation Siren, and the best of the best gear in the game will likely take you weeks to months to craft. Operation Siren is kinda like a conquest-style gameplay loop, where it has its own stamina system, but your fleets don't require oil or have an ammo count. You'll explore these undiscovered tile sets to search for enemies and loot, and there's a meta progression system with its own rewards. Primarily, this is where you get the parts to craft certain gear in the gear lab. You'll need the necessary parts, then a certain amount of another weapon's blueprint. Quite a lot of stuff you have to chase down. Some ships also have retrofit upgrades in order to catch up with the ever-changing power creep of the game throughout the years. The blueprints for retrofitting can mostly be farmed in the hard mode of the campaign, but you can only do 3 hard mode stages a day. Here's also a bit of jank. You have to get the final modernization upgrade to unlock the retrofit version of the ship, except the preview just says this. What does that even mean? It was only after I completed my first retrofit that I realized that the ship girl actually transforms into a different version and you get new skills. Before I forget, if you go into the catalog, you can rate each ship in the game and even leave comments. Let's just say that this feature is both a blessing and a curse. The Meowficers are kinda like logistics members assigned to a fleet that gives further stats and bonuses. They're also split into different rarities, and training one will take up real-life time. You can assign 2 to a fleet, so this is another avenue of progression to make your team stronger. You have to get the cat boxes that drop the officers of varying rarity, or you can buy them with gold, but the first box every day is free. I believe this also ties into the naval combat theme of the game, since cats were frequently on board these vessels for companionship and getting rid of pests. So in a weird way, it is lore accurate. You can also run commissions to get more loot, as well as some passive leveling for certain ships. Some of these are time sensitive that they only show up at certain times during the day or when you do specific things while in game. It'll warn you if the commission will cost oil, though here's something that might cause some trouble for you. If a unit is actively in a commission, you cannot use them for battle. If you want to use a unit that's already in a fleet, the game will warn that there will be an empty spot in that fleet since the unit will be busy. Except when the commission ends, they're not added back into your fleet, so you have to do it manually. This will be a recurring pattern. Just like a few other older gachas, there will be a level of jank you have to deal with. But we can't forget about the oath system. You can literally marry a ship girl after you max out your bond points, and you'll need a ring which is bought with gems. But I did get one for free. Once oathed, you get further stat boosts and the chance to rename them. However, I realized I sort of got scammed, as some ship girls have a unique skin after you oath them, while some don't. However, one major kudos I have to give is that you can oath any collab characters as well, like the VTubers from Hololive. This is so base because given the popularity of VTubing these days, I can't even fathom there will be a gacha game that lets you do this again. Let's also talk about inventory space. To start out, you don't have infinite slots in your dock. and when the number of units starts to exceed it, you'll be asked to clear up some room. You can increase dock space by paying 200 gems for 10 extra. Now, gems is the premium currency in the game, but you can't think of it like Primo Gems from Genshin Impact. Just like older era mobile games, it's more rare and only given out in extremely limited quantities for free. Coincidentally, it's also the currency used to buy the highly coveted skins. As a beginner, you can forget about the skins, because it's just much better to spend it on things you can actually use to progress faster. Increasing dock space and unlocking more training slots in the dorm should be where you're spending gems. This also has to do with how ship collection works in the game. It's not in your interest to just discard unused ships you don't want, since you actually benefit from having as many ships in the full roster as you can, for reasons I'll talk about in a bit. Since there are now over 500 ships in the game, the 100 given to you at the start is minuscule to the amount you will actually need. Plus, the boolings will take up spots as well, and you might as well just keep them there in case you need them in the future. So cases like this will also eat away at your dock space. You can use these skill books to level a ship's skills, except just like in GFL, these actually take up time to use each book, so it's not instant. You can only have a number of ships undergoing training at a time, but you can buy more slots with gems. With some progression items, you can compose some of them to a higher tier, so the blue skill books can be converted to a purple. While the purples have a longer timer and give more XP, you will still lose out on pure XP efficiency. So while you can maximize progression by logging in every 2 hours with just the blues, that's still a lot of micromanagement to do. There's all sorts of currencies and items you can buy within the shop, though I found that there's also a fair share of unintuitive UI and ambiguity of what everything means. For example, if I wanted to buy the gear Z flag, I'd open its description page and see what it says. The buff it provides says that it gives a bonus effect for certain ships. So some questions. What ships and what bonuses? It's the same deal as some older gachas like FGO that don't bother giving the full description of certain things in the game. After all, what does it mean for a skill to massively increase your attack? Another source of jank is that the menu to disassemble the ships you have isn't in the dock section. You think that in the same place where you make all sorts of upgrades to your ships will also be where you can dismiss them. But no, the retirement tab is located in the build section, where you construct ships instead. The dorm is exactly what you'll expect. You can expand it or buy furnishing with dorm coins, but it can also be bought with gems. You can place a number of ships in the dorm, and not only do they passively get leveled, it quickens the respiration of morale, which gets lower when they're used in combat. You can buy more snacks with oil or gems to keep them happy and continue leveling them this way. This is also the other important place to prioritize spending gems for beginners, since you obviously want more slots to passively train your units, and letting them rest in the dorm means that if you have a surplus of oil and plan to grind the game for like 5 hours straight, then their morale loss will be offset by the gain in the dorm, so you can keep auto-battling without worrying losing affinity with them. The slots get more expensive the more you open. The comfort level determines how fast they can gain XP, and you can naturally get more by expanding and decorating the dorm. I wasn't feeling too creative, so I just bought a set from the shop. I had a rough time figuring out the shipyard area. At some point post-launch, the game introduced a special group of ships that you have to complete research in order to unlock, and these ships cannot be obtained through other means. Before we can even talk about the shipyard research system, I like to point out that given this was a post-launch feature, the devs had to account that its core players had already progressed the game to a certain point when they made this feature, meaning that it's not exactly beginner-friendly to get into the research ships. Specifically, the ships in this category are called the PR/DR, which stands for Priority and Decisive Rarity. It has had a lot of updates over the years, and as you can see, there are many series of ships that were added. In order to obtain a research ship, you have to first complete the prerequisite requirement to unlock the research at all, then complete a series of tasks for the full unlock. The prerequisite requirement will want you to have achieved a certain milestone in your ship collection, such as accumulating enough tech points with a certain faction. How you get those points is kind of interesting. Tapping on the requirement doesn't give you any info, so I just looked it up and consulted other areas of the game to find out what an Iron Blood point is. Going into the collection tab, you can see that you're given faction and fleet points for achieving certain goals with the ships in that faction, just by collecting it for the first time when they reach level 120 and when they reach their max star level. Remember what I said about how you can't really just discard the low rarity ships? This is why. It's beneficial to have them around because they still contribute to your overall collection points, which is used to unlock the research ships and will permanently provide stat boosts to your entire roster. That's why dock space is so important and why you can't just disassemble the ships you don't want. The crazy part is that the game does not tell you about this. If you've been discarding the ships you didn't want, even if you only had one copy of them, that would have been a mistake. There's a lot of jank and roadblocks in the game, but I'd say one of its enticing aspects for players is that you do feel the accomplishment and progress of slowly building up your collection. You can see that there's a lot of time gates in the game where you're expected to play for months at a time, but it's still realistic to collect almost every ship for free. Since the main monetization model is through skins, which we'll talk about later, the collection portion can be approached by anyone. And as long as you put in the time and dedication, you can still make it far, as no gameplay advantages are locked behind any paywalls. Okay, aside from the gem upgrades, but you know. Once you complete the prerequisites, the tasks to get the PR ship will unlock once every 24 hours, so granting permission to see all the tasks will take you a week-long wait time. After you're done with all the tasks, then the ship is unlocked and you can start using them for battle. However, enhancing these ships also has their own progression system. In order to increase the star tier and increase their stats, you'll have to feed them their respective blueprints. For a max level up, you'll need like 300 of those. You get these blueprints from either just event rewards or get them randomly when in the research lab. This is sort of like daily commissions, but you can queue up to 5 research topics at a time, and starting one will require you to invest in some gold, cubes, or do some tasks like completing certain stages in the campaign or scrap some gear. From here, since the game has been live for a long time and there's a lot of research ships, the game has a catch-up mechanic that for every time you complete a research, you're guaranteed to receive blueprints of a ship you selected. However, even with this, after I logged in every day to be at max efficiency, I played for nearly 2 months to get 300 needed to fully enhance a ship. This will be a long and steady process for every player. Don't expect the streamlined progression from newer gacha games. You'll be here for a while. After you fully max out a research ship, then you'll get yet another progression chart called Fate Simulation, where you can feed them even more blueprints to raise stats and a new skill at the end. Also worth mentioning that if you run out of blueprints, you are allowed to spend gold as an alternative. The first few times are free and heavily discounted, but will rack up in price afterwards. The gold discounts reset daily, so you can inch a little closer to the next upgrade every day. There's also another faction of ships called the Metas, which are kinda like the alter versions of characters from FGO, where their personality and appearance are more abrasive than their normal counterparts. They're usually given out or can be earned in some way, but they also have their own unique upgrade system. For example, the current meta ship can be obtained from the free version of the Battle Pass, and their dupe shards will be used to limit break them instead. Luckily, it wasn't necessary for me to go too deep into this, because most of the meta ships are not good and only really usable when you hyper-invest, which is just not worth it for a beginner. Just like the regular shipyard, it follows similar steps in its upgrade system. But here's one of the whole process that confused me. Say I wanted to unlock the skills for this meta ship here. You can get prompted to spend the skill book to unlock it, except you can't preview what it does in-game, so I had no clue what I'm unlocking here. It's only after you unlock can you see the full skill description. I tried clicking on every button to see if I missed something, but there was nothing. I really think there should be a way to preview the description here, but hey, just more old school gacha shenanigans. From everything I've learned about Azur Lane, its progression system is very distinct for one major reason. You can realistically get every ship in the game for free, but you're in it for the long term. Don't come in here thinking that you can pick and choose your favorite ships and just sweep stages for 2 minutes a day and be done. It's a gacha game in the most traditional sense. You want to collect as many ships as you can and feel satisfied that every run of farming or every task you complete will contribute to the total power of your roster. It's an old school style of thinking. You put in the effort, you get rewarded. However, this obviously poses a bigger barrier to entry than a lot of other gacha games on the market. If you want to widen your collection, be prepared to lock in for months at a time, grinding away at some of the farming stages. That's the reason why I'd argue the progression in this game can either be seen as a positive or negative. However, this next section might change some minds. Is Azur Lane even a gacha game? Well, yes, kind of. It does appear on the monthly revenue PvP list. It's just that it's arguable if it can be put on the same pedestal as the traditional gacha games we all love and enjoy. Instead, just like the First Girls Frontline and some older era gachas, the main way you can obtain ships is through the construction. You'll need a bit of gold and these things called wisdom cubes to construct a ship. There are different banners and classes of ships you can construct, with the light type requiring just 1 cube and less than half the coins of a regular construction. The rates are as displayed: 12% for an elite or SR, 7% for a legendary, and 1.2% for an ultra rare. The light banner, however, in exchange for a lower cost per construction attempt, it's not possible for UR ships to drop here. Once a construction instance starts, it gets queued up here. The time to completion also seems to be random, and I don't believe that just because the timer is long, it guarantees a rare ship. As you probably expect, the majority of the UR grade ships are very good, while the lower commons and rares are most of the time hot garbage. I actually managed to get an UR during the time I played, and there's even a unique summon animation when they do come out. In addition, their default sprite already contains live 2D animation, while the other peasant ships don't. Now, I've never really liked hidden rarity tiers in gacha games, so I just recognize the URs as the actual SSRs and the legendaries as the SRs, with the purples and below being common. If you put it like that, a 1.2% drop chance isn't exactly that high anymore. I believe there is a total cap on how many constructions can be queued, and here's another small thing I wanted to point out. If you had like 6 cubes, then it's natural that you will be allowed 6 constructions at this time if you were pulling on the light banner. If you were to click on the max button here, you would expect that it's a shortcut to max out the amount of constructions you can make at this time, except it just sets the number to 10. There's no reason I want this set over the max amount of constructions I can do right now. It's a small thing for sure, though just like GFL, you'll start noticing these small annoyances over time. You get 2 requisition medals for every cube you spent on construction, so this sorta serves as the mileage system. There's a separate requisition banner that you can spend 6 of these things on, except this is basically worthless. You can instead spend the medals in its respective shop for good stuff instead. Why gamble for good ships when you can just guarantee them? However, there is still the matter of the pity system, and that also works in unique ways. For one, there's a common pity for 400 points, where upon reaching it, you get to pick from a selection of UR ships that are in the permanent pool, with more added over time. 1 point of mileage is rewarded whenever you spend 1 wisdom cube. So if you construct on the non-light banner, then you get 2 mileage every time since the cost per construction is 2 cubes instead of 1. Cubes are given out for free in daily and weekly missions, and due to the gacha being construction-based, re-rolling was not actually recommended when I got into the game, as the currency you get for construction is spread out as you play, instead of being front-loaded at you. At times, there are special rate-up banners that feature a limited UR or SSR, with the rate-up chance as follows. If there's a UR ship on the banner, then this banner type will have its own independent pity. The counter will read 200, but that count is for the total amount of constructions made on this banner. Since each attempt is 2 wisdom cubes, it's realistically 200 pulls or 400 cubes to reach the pity. Once you reach the pity, you can spark for a guaranteed copy of the on-banner UR ship. However, this pity is solely for the UR, not SSR units. If you wanted to get the SSR of a banner, then there is no pity for that. You just have to keep constructing ships until you get it. My guess is that since the construction gacha doesn't actually count as a traditional gacha, it doesn't have to adhere to certain regulations like having a pity counter for it. Just like GFL, you can realistically get a steady stream of new ships to play with, just that you have to be patient since every construction attempt will take time. Given that there's a gold cap in the game, you're not allowed to just keep hoarding gold to spend them all in one go. This was where I ran into a bit of a roadblock. When you're in the mid to late game, you can access the stages that give you more gold at higher efficiency, since the pity to spark the rate up UR is 200 pulls or 300,000 gold. As a beginner though, getting this amount of gold even during the banner period is almost impossible unless you pay for a boost. If you miraculously scrounge together the gold, you're forfeiting other avenues of upgrades the same gold could have been used on your account. Instead of throwing it away for the chance to get a really good ship, you could have used it to upgrade your existing fleets, get augment gear, limit break your units, retrofitting some key ships. The UR ships also need to be limit broken, so you either get more of them in the gacha, or you buy the UR bullets, which are extremely rare and expensive. In a weird way, actually committing to a limited UR banner is not something beginners might do, since you're better off using the gold to make guaranteed upgrades to your account. Of course, you could believe in the art of gambling and luck sack it like me. I overall didn't really have a problem with the system. The most coveted ships are still the URs, but plenty of the lower rarities are still very much viable. However, the construction gacha is not exactly the main monetization model of the game, so we'll take a look at that next. For the cash shop, you can buy either the gems, premium currency, or just directly buy packs. If I'm gonna be honest, a lot of these packs with gameplay advantages just aren't very good at all. For example, there's an $8 monthly sub that gets you some gems right away, and a supply of oil, gold, and a cube every day. The value that this provides is questionable. I'd be more interested if it actually gave gems every day, because the materials that it gives out barely makes a dent if you're already into the mid and late game. The same thing goes for the battle pass. You already get the meta ship for free, so you only get common materials for paying the premium track. Despite this, I did spend a bit of money on the game, on 2 packs specifically. The first one was a $5 pack that lets you skip your captain level to 70, effectively bypassing some grind you have to do to unlock some features of the game. The second was this pack right here, $16 to instantly skip the research prerequisites, the research missions themselves, and enough blueprints to max out a priority grade ship. This effectively lets you skip around 2 months worth of grind in some cases, and guarantees you a powerful ship near their max potential. And I don't really have a problem with this being in the game. First, well, I bought it, I need to justify my spendings. Also, if you were to search up how much money is needed to flat out buy a rare character in modern gacha games, $16 and the upgrades to max it out suddenly looks pretty good in comparison. You can buy a pack for each of the series that are released right now. This will undoubtedly give you a massive boost in progression. Gems, on the other hand, can be used to buy the all-important dock space and training slots. These two should be priority number 1 for new players. While gems are also used to buy character skins, it's just a much better use to propel the efficiency of your account instead. However, if you do manage to get your account sorted out and just have some disposable income, you can, of course, buy the one thing that Azur Lane is actually known for. Without a doubt, Azur Lane is one of the pioneers in utilizing live 2D technology when gacha games were still emerging. While I'm sure the rest of the industry would have normalized its use anyways, there's a lot of evidence that its highly intricate skins and attention to detail, while having an affordable price, is what keeps a lot of people playing. What I'm trying to say is, if the skin preview is 1 hour long, then you know it's gonna be good. So, the skin system is an aspect of the game I can't really judge since I don't have a lot of the skins myself, and the designs of these skins have way more interactive elements than something from other gacha games. The best part is that the pricing is actually affordable, with the very high quality skins costing around $20 if you do the conversion from gems. Can you get skins for free just by earning gems while in-game? Technically, yes. However, as a beginner, just invest in things that increase your efficiency, but if you're completely free to play, you can probably get enough to get a free skin maybe once a year. To be fair, the game cannot make money from the construction gacha, so its profit maker is squarely focused on the skins, as you can probably evidently tell from the marketing from their Twitter account. In today's gaming sphere, cosmetics is seen as one of the most acceptable ways to monetize a game. If you consider the fair pricing, it's a good bargain. To put into perspective, other gacha games with 2D art like Nikke are charging $60 that don't have nearly enough customization in their skins, and the market is actually becoming more accepting of skins costing around that price range. However, Azur Lane never chose to raise those prices. Granted, some of these skins are time limited and you have to wait for a rerun if you really wanted one. But in terms of the example to set for skin monetization, I wish there was more that followed Azur Lane. Skins will be more of a luxury and beginners have less reason to buy those, given gems are way better spent elsewhere. This means that the main attraction of the game is mostly targeted towards seasoned players that already have a big collection so that the skin can be applied to a ship. However, if you're broke but still want to experience some of the skins, there's also the rental system that lets you rent out a featured skin for a week. You get 3 of these per patch, so what this means is that even if you're a free-to-play player that owns little to no premium skins yourself, you can simply have a small flavor of something every week just by setting the rental skin to your main menu. Since the feature skins rotate periodically, you can just keep renting them as new ones come out. It really has to be stated just how much value you're getting with the Azur Lane skins. A lot of the tactics behind gacha games rely on FOMO and gambling-like behavior. While that's sort of the case here with the limited time skins, what I particularly like about Azur Lane is that its business model solely relies on making a good product. So there's an MMO called Final Fantasy XIV where in order to play it, you have to pay a monthly sub. There's a free trial, but there's no way to play the game unless you pay for it. You pay the sub, you get access to the whole game, and no one can gain an advantage over you gameplay-wise. I think personally this is one of the best possible monetization models for consumers in a live service game. The reason is simple. In order to make money, you have to convince players to keep paying the sub. But in order to do that, you have to actually make a good game. The game cannot rely on gacha or progression boost packs people can buy. It has to excel in all the general areas so that people want to play more of it. Unfortunately, this model is extremely rare, especially in the mobile gaming space. The vast majority of them are expected to be freemium. Everyone doesn't want to pay an upfront fee to start playing these games, so it's just not normalized within gacha games. However, I imagine Azur Lane is sort of a glimpse of this. The full roster is technically open to all players as long as you put in the effort, and the skin system is an all-or-nothing purchase. You either get the skin or you don't. There's no randomness or trickery going on here. If they make a desirable piece of cosmetics, people are gonna want it. This is what I imagine to be Azur Lane's greatest selling point. Now, there's still a bunch of jank in the UI and general unintuitiveness of its systems for new players, but in exchange for that, you got one of the most honest business models. If you want to experience the past event stages, they're archived in the War Archives. There's a collection tab if you also want to view the story, but I'm gonna say it. No one really plays the game for the story. Some of the past event stages are quite profitable in terms of loot drops, so gameplay-wise, you still get a lot of content there. You get 4 entry chips per day, since entering a past event stage will cost 1, even if you've cleared it once already. From what I understand, the events themselves mostly contain their own mini-scenarios, maybe some mini-games, and event farming stages that give out good stuff, that usually yields better efficiency from just normal farms. Some of the ships have to be farmed in specific stages, but aside from the limited URs, they're mostly in the game, available for you to collect when you get lucky enough. There is a challenge mode, though I couldn't do any of these since 2 months is not enough time to get an actual late game fleet going. The true late game mode is called Meta Showdown, where due to its unique rules, certain ships that may perform poorly elsewhere can suddenly become extremely good in this mode. Obviously, I can't talk about this in detail since it'll be a long time before I can get a good feel on the game progression, but I heard it's actually pretty difficult, so you'll have another reason to start maxing out your favorite ships. Although, it's kinda weird the icon to enter the mode is the same place where you check the battle pass and commissions. It's supposed to be an extra tab within the Operation Siren menu, so I just thought that was a little odd. The game has had a lot of updates to its systems and progression in the 8 or so years it's been live, and not every major change has been documented and streamlined for new players going in today. So, just like some of my complaints in the progression section, you will have to spend some time navigating its different features and figuring out how to proceed. Some of these modes are such stark contrasts to the main core portion of the game that you might not even know that it's still the same game. Once you do get into the groove of things, you'll notice that the game has a lot of grind, but the same grind can be very satisfying knowing that every run of a farming stage, no matter how insignificant, will contribute to making your whole roster stronger. So Azur Lane has had a pretty good run in this market. 8 years later, it's still going as one of the older era gachas that prevailed in more modern times. Right off the bat, I can tell you for players that come in with expectations of modern gacha games, it might not be for them. Azur Lane has an old-school method of progression, where there's no sweet features, certain UI and mechanical features that are not explained to you, and getting your fleet to an endgame state won't take days or weeks, but likely months. However, once you realize that you can realistically collect every ship in the game for free given enough dedication, and that the game can actually feel sort of addicting in the sense that you can't pay your way to become the strongest, The main monetization model the game has is through its cosmetics, which is weirdly honest given that it has no gameplay advantages, has a fixed price with no further gacha system, and the skins it provides are some of the most ingeniously designed in all of gacha gaming. It's a fair and honest transaction to make your gooner brain happy, which in the world of $60 skins or dedicated skin gachas is something that a lot of gacha games don't do anymore. I don't imagine the game gets big influxes of new players these days, but it does an extremely good job of reinforcing long-term play and rewarding those that did go through the gauntlets of collecting the roster of ship girls. Despite its imperfections, it demonstrates that the old way may still be better. That's it for the long review, so thank you for joining me today. If you want to catch more gacha-related content like this, you know what to do. You can support what I do for as little as $2 a month on Patreon. Thank you for watching, be sure to spend moderately, and have fun out there.